And so I guess everyone feels that they win if they survive.
Welcome to the Classic Adventure Gaming Podcast. My name is Gus, and today we are following up our last episode, speaking with winners of the No Art Punk contest, with a discussion with winners of the hottest new design contest on the block, put on by none other than Mr. Ben Gibson, one of the winning alumni of No Art Punk. The Adventure Site contest, as he is calling it, challenged contestants to put together a 2-page fantasy adventure that could be easily dropped into a hex location and very usable at the table for an enjoyable evening of D&D. Spoiler, Ben and the contestants have succeeded, and we'll be speaking with several of the winners on the show today. Just a bit of news to provide, as it's been a few months between episodes. Fight On Magazine has released issue 15 to much acclaim and is actively soliciting submissions for issue 16. You should have a couple weeks to get those in by the time this podcast releases. Additionally, our esteemed panel member here on CAG, Mr. Prince of Nothing, has recently gotten himself married. So if you'd like to congratulate him, as always, come on over to the Discord server to say hi. From that high to unfortunately sadder news, Mr. Anthony Huso, adventure designer extraordinaire of hits such as Dream House of the Nether Prince, The Night Wolf Inn, and A Fabled City of Brass, announced that his wife has been diagnosed with cancer. If you'd like to help out Mr. Huso and his family, he has launched an autumn sale on his products, and I'll link that in the show notes. And finally, Mr. Gibson is launching Adventure Site Contest 2 on October 1st. This is a great opportunity to create something that you will most certainly get use of at your table, as well as just receive constructive feedback from a great panel of judges to help improve your fantasy adventure design chops. Links will be in the show notes. And now, let's jump into it with the boys. Well, welcome everybody. We've got a very astute panel today, a bunch of adventure writers, and so we have the pleasure to discuss their particular adventure sites. Commodore, would you do us the honors of describing this competition, that first annual competition, to our listeners?
Absolutely. So this was Adventure Sites 1. It's an adventure site contest that I've been hosting over at my, I believe you'll have it in the show notes, my own blog, where I and several other judges, who some of whom are here today, are going to judge a bunch of submitted adventures. All these adventures are supposed to be small, something that can be stumbled into a hex crawl or in a city, something on those lines. The page limit was just 2 pages. Maps. There had to be some sort of map, some sort of pages. It had to be something basically that was usable at the table, something a dungeon master can just quickly grab if they're going into this hex and present it to a table of 3 to 6 over-caffeinated or slightly drunk vagrants, and they'll all have a great time. We had 18 adventures that were submitted. The top 8 were going to be actually compiled and published, but all of the adventures were going to be reviewed. Part of the value for the authors is I wanted to give everybody a chance to actually get reviews on their content. Something for me personally has been improved. I've never had improvement for anything I've written that didn't have some sort of review or feedback. Often the harshest feedback is the most helpful. Although I don't believe anybody was too harsh on this one. Everybody was really creative. Everybody had a lot of charm, a lot of usability. So the 8 that we finally selected were a very wide variety. We start with Legacy of the Black Mark, which was just a couple points winning outright. It was a very cold and chilly site. It just oozed flavor. There's all kinds of there's a little tiny dungeon with all kinds of very nasty traps, very nasty little side jaunts, and it had a lot of wealth in it, a lot of ways of dying. It's an easy thing to stumble on. Then you have St. Durham's Home for Wayward Youth, which is an entirely different kind of adventure site. That was by Trent. That one is an orphanage. It's a temple, it's a slaver's den, and it's a cult site. It's all at once. We can describe that one a little bit later. We have most of the authors here, but Trent and the runner-up, Stushi, were not here. Stushi's Fountain of Beck was a wonderful troll site They had a relic-loaded little distant fountain of a agricultural goddess, exactly the kind of thing you want to stumble in on. Then we had Etta Cap's cottage, which was arachnophobia delivered by way of the Brothers Grimm. It would probably be the most consistent fairy tale flavor of all of them, about a spider cottage from Etta Cap, as you might expect, all made out of silk. Then we have Lipley's Tavern, which is, as you might hope from that wonderful title, it is actually Bag End, except as a dungeon. It is a retired halfling adventurer, his hobbit hole that was a tavern that burned down and now is full of all kinds of nastiness. You have to go crawling through the hobbit hole. Then you have the Glen of Shrikes, which was a little on the controversial side because it was actually several adventure sites. It's a hex that was done, but a lot of the little adventure sites within that hex, the 6 Mile hex, all had quite a lot of creativity, quite a lot of impressive function. And we'll have to be asking Giant Goose when he gets here. Also, a lot of the psychic rules, which are not covered in a lot of AD&D adventures. Then we had the Barrow Shrine of Corruption, which was a very much like the platonic ideal of a site for adventure brief. Probably of all of them, it was the tightest. It was just a design for a wonderful, mysterious shrine found in the middle of the woods. There's nasty knolls and a nasty trap full of spiders. And then the final winner was the Lost Vault of Kadish by Jonathan Becker, JB. He is here. That's a sandy style site, as you'd expect from the Vault of Kadish. It is a dead warlord's site. It just works. It's full of traps. There's all kinds of gritty tomb adventures that you'd want to see. So that was the whole set of them. And I have, again, 6 of the 8 winners here with us. The other 2, we can definitely ask. You can definitely ask them questions too if you come on to the CAG Discord or any of their things. They are very responsive as well. But I'll go ahead and get started with Danger is Real. His Legacy of the Black Mark adventure. I believe you delivered within the first 24 hours of the Adventure Site contest opening. Danger.
That's correct. Yes, yes. And the reason is that the adventure was already written when you announce the contest. I start. In fact, I was starting to write this adventure before you announce the contest. It was something I wanted to do for myself before, and so the timing was perfect. And so yeah, when the release date was there, I was ready directly.
Well, it shows. It shows real polish. It shows it's been actually played. I'll go ahead and start the first question. What was your process coming up with this adventure site?
Okay, this is a bit funny because my first idea with this adventure, so it was two things. First, I wanted to do my mini Tomb of Horror, so I really wanted to do a deadly dungeon with nasty traps, like you said, and also I wanted to do a dungeon in 60 minutes. Of course, it was a kind of crazy challenge that turns to be 120 minutes, and then I stopped to count because with I did a first iteration, and then a second one, and a third one, and then it started to. Yeah, I stopped to count the number of hours I spent on it. But my process was, I would say, my usual process. So I start with a map. I start to draw a map, and then I think about my factions. I think about I would say my main story about the dungeon. So more why what it is, what it is, and what kind of monster I will put on it, and what kind of treasure. I always try to to focus on the treasure because it's quite important. At the end, it's why the adventurers are there. Beside this. So I came up, I would say maybe in 1 week with the first version of the dungeon, and then I start to playtest it with my friends online. Actually, I did two playtests, so with two different groups. And after the first one, I realized yeah, some stuff were not okay, so I make some modification. And finally, I did a second playtest, and this one was more successful, I would say, because the the first one ended up in a TPK straight away. With the Morlocks, and so that's it. So really, I think where I spend the most of the time, it's of course on the main monster. So the actual legacy of the black marks. So all the little mechanism around the main event, so that if you have the black marks, okay, you can be possessed by the evil spirit, and if you don't, you have a different you have a different effect. So I wanted to do something a bit something, I would say, beside the normal grind of old school combats.
And it came out really successfully. Grutzy and Owen were both also judges. Did you guys have any questions for Danger? Plays really well, by the way. This is one of the ones I've actually had the chance to run.
I don't have a question right now, but it was the one I think I put it as my first place in my ranking, the final ranking I submitted, and that had a lot to do with the fact that it was one of two adventures I got to play test before we had to make the rankings final, because we had our local convention here in Germany, and I took some of the adventures with me, and Legacy of the Black Mark was one of them. I could play with a group of total strangers, and it worked like a charm. And I think that has a bit to do with the fact that I put it so high, because damn, the thing just works.
And did your groups succeed?
Yeah, partly. um, I had one. It has nothing to do with the adventure, but they had a kind of infight where one of the players was convinced that some sort of one of the treasure pieces they found was kind of cursed and wanted to take it from another player, and then they basically wiped themselves out by infighting, while the Morlocks, with which they had made peace at that point, or like um, a little alliance. The Morlocks watched in horror as they basically pummeled themselves to death like idiots, but that had nothing to do with the adventure. But they cleared most of it except for the main event with Arcana and the
With
room with the
Arcana,
6
yeah.
statues.
Yeah, I mean, it was my first group. They TPK with the Morlock because they they attacked the Morlock, and it was really so bad dice rolls. So they just they just failed directly. And my second group, they also explore it quite extensively, and they manage to understand the black mark. They get teleported. One of the guy get the black mark, and when they confront Irkana, yeah, it was they didn't think about burning down the things, and so they have to run away because the first one was a kind of a one shot, but the second playtest, it was really my main group in my main campaign. So they were a bit more careful, of course, and they run away, and they plan to come back sometime.
Yeah, my own group, when I ran it for them, they did quite succeed quite well, but it was only because they had some neutralized poison scrolls that they'd gotten from previous adventures. They had this is an extremely poisonous site.
Yes.
It was great. A little aside, for some reason, arachnids were the theme of the adventure sites this time around. Of course, the winner had scorpions, but there were 4 spider-themed adventures in this compilation.
Yeah, and a couple of tombs. So a pretty standard D&D mix, I think, for that, spiders and tombs. Well, in terms of the black mark, what I liked, and I obviously reviewed this, and Dangerous heard my thoughts, I guess, that way. But I liked that it sort of had a few different things going on, avenues to pursue. I think stuff coming out of it, like the black market itself and other stuff around that can, both within the site and out of it, if it's affecting a campaign, that continues to have an impact, or that can have an impact in the context of the adventure. That is intelligent. I think that's good. And yeah, it was obviously, it works, and it was obviously tested. And I do think it's interesting to compare the fact that you mentioned the Tomb of Horrors, the difference between players playing a game as a one shot, same for Grutzies, versus, and Commodore mentions this, people playing a game, an adventure as part of a campaign, and the fact those engender with puzzle dungeons, maybe more than anything, they engender really different reactions, I think. And I think, it allows you to do either probably with Black Mark. Suits either situation.
Indeed. My first idea was just to do a one shot, and I wanted to do a deadly dungeon, but after I decided to drop it in my main campaign to play test it, and I must admit I was a bit I hope my players will not hate me too much after this, because I knew it was quite deadly, but finally they could escape it.
No, you should feel good about it. It was a really good. It just plays really well, and it just had a wonderful thing. And like I said, it was 24 hours. You did a really good job just delivering it fast. It set a high bar to start with.
Thank you. I was really pleased to be able to submit an adventure with you guys, because also, as you can hear, I'm a French speaker, so also right. In fact, my first version of the adventure, it was written in French because it was for my own use, and also translating everything into English and polishing, and also the word count. It was it's interesting. It was really interesting. Also a nice exercises for me to do that, and that's why also the font is a little bit small. I'm sorry for this. I admit that I abuse a little bit the font size.
No, you didn't. Trust me, you didn't.
Yeah, we'll get to abusers of font sizes shortly here.
The new EOTB rule, we'll call it.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes, there was a worse abuse that we're coming on. But we'll go on to the next in the list that's has the author here. That's Scott M. He had Etta Cap's Cottage. Like I said, it was just a wonderful fairy tale. I loved how it just gets introduced by this fairy tale cottage that's made out of spider webs with a old hag sitting in the open window. I'm coming off this the most fresh, actually, Scott, because I actually played this literally last night with my players bumped into it, and they were appropriately creeped out by an old hag in a spider cottage. But her cackling and saying, "Bring me fresh meat" when spiders attacked was wonderful, and then, of course, saying, "Go away and leave me be." No party is gonna ignore that kind of invitation. So, it was just a wonderful adventure to play through. Once again, continuing the spider theme, this one spidered even more spiders than ever spidered. Uh, so Scott, what was your process for coming up with this adventure site?
Well, I was running a 5th edition campaign during the pandemic for my girlfriend and a group of players, none of whom had ever played any Dungeons and Dragons, had no sort of computer game experience. Their only reference to fantasy was things like Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or Game of Thrones. And so I had developed, and I wasn't even sure that they would enjoy playing, but they showed some interest. So I developed a little mini campaign to start out with, and just to see if they liked it. And they turned out to love it. And it was a great thing for us to do during the pandemic. And so I had developed a sort of a fairy forest kind of campaign setting where the forest had become corrupted by this green hag, and there were lots of little encounter areas that sort of reflected that dark fairy kind of attitude. Um, and this was actually it came about as a random encounter roll. I was rolling between sessions; they were heading to a specific location, and just so to save some time, I rolled up a few encounters on the road, and I rolled up giant spiders. But I wanted to do something a little bit different, and I'm not sure exactly where it came from. I just sort of had a spark of an idea. I imagined this sort of web cottage up in the trees, and it all just sort of flowed out of that. So Edda first existed as a 5th edition encounter. It was a little different in scope. 5th edition is a much more tactics based kind of game, and so the encounter was definitely different. And spiders in 5th edition are arguably not as mean as they are in in first edition. But um, as I kind of wore out my welcome on fifth edition, I converted it to Osric, and it took on a slightly different um, tone. Obviously, because spiders are absolutely more deadly in Osric, and I wasn't really doing anything with the adventure. I think I had the idea that I was going to try to publish it just on Drive Through RPG or one of those sites. And then I came across your contest on somebody's blog. It may have been JB's blog uh, that referenced that you were running it. And I thought, well, there's a good opportunity to sort of put this out there and see what people think. I read Prince's blog pretty regularly. I read Bryce's blog, and I like the idea of having a critique by people who know what they're doing. And so I submitted it, and I did have to edit it down a little bit. There's quite a bit of context to the adventure that didn't quite make it into the finished product, but that was more based on my own campaign, and it wasn't critical to running the adventure. Um, so, and I was pretty pleased at the result. I mean, everybody seemed to like it. I think the main criticism was that it's fairly linear, which is true. It was designed as a layer, and really, I designed it to be linear because it's meant to reflect sort of a funnel spider where she's drawing you into the heart of the layer where she ultimately tries to kill you. But it came out really well. I was pleased with the result, particularly because it was just meant to be a sort of one-off wandering encounter. And I will say that my original group, they encountered her outside and they basically noped out of the whole thing and decided to move on without challenging her. So they never actually made it inside the cottage.
Yeah. Oh, and did you have some questions on that? Because again, Owen and Grutzy both. I remember you both reviewed it.
I don't know. Questions isn't the word. Yeah, I enjoyed the fairy tale vibe, and I think it could certainly I could see it fitting into a campaign like I so on pause at the moment, but I have a long running Domwood campaign, and I could definitely see adapting something like that into something where that's the prevailing vibe, or maybe just in fairy or the Dreamlands, something like that, something where so yeah, I thought the flavor was very strong, and the environment. I think weird, like unusual dungeon environments, like a web surrounding a tree. That's memorable. There's a separate thing just to kind of show that players get, I think, and DMs out of being somewhere memorable, even though technically all the underlying code is the same. Do you know what I mean? Like the numbers theoretically might be the same, but the experience because of the substance itself is different. So yeah, I thought that kind of side of it was really strong. That was my thoughts about it.
Yeah, basically the same here. I think it's a highly fantastic area, the whole spiderweb thing. I actually have a question, and if I think about it right now, there's a whole section in the beginning where you kind of lay down the rules for interacting with the spider webs. Like you can walk through walls in this dungeon, you can tear down the walls, you can interact in a way with a dungeon that you cannot in most other dungeons because all of it is made with spider silk. And the question here is, you said you basically wrote it for 5e as a blown up encounter. Did you add those rules for the contest or for the conversion to Osric, or did you had it? In what way were those rules already there for 5e? Because they they are really really specific, and I like it.
No, they were there for 5e. My players, oddly enough, to be complete novices at the game, they're very creative in how they approach things. And I've even found in some ways they are kind of better at that than some of my veteran players. I don't know if that's because they sort of lack the context, or they just approach these types of things in a very specific way that people don't often think about. The whole reason that the protection from fire is in there is I have one player in particular who loved to make burning arrows, and she would shoot everything with, with flaming arrows, and so I knew very quickly I had to make sure that that wasn't the immediate approach to this, because otherwise she would have just burned the whole thing down. Um, and so no, all of that was in there. I definitely try to when I'm designing a dungeon, I try to think of how I would beat it, and that would be the first thing I would do is try to hack through the walls and avoid the obvious, entrances and exits.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something I can very much get behind, and I like the what do you call it, the follow through, because too often in even professionally published dungeons, I see that there's kind of like hints at certain stuff like the dungeon introduces windows in a wall but has no way to mechanically interact, so it falls on the DM to kind of make something of it. That's why I really, really like little sections like yours where you lay down the rules for creatively interacting with the stuff. That was one of the reasons I think I ranked it rather high.
Environmental effects are always really important to me, so I think that's a often underused element of dungeon design is you can really play with an environment to challenge people versus just throwing more monsters at them.
I think it's a fruit of adventures being written for games. In your case, you're like, oh, they didn't actually even enter the main site. But that's not actually a problem, because the experience of playing with real players and this coming out of the kind of the anvil, being forged on the anvil of actual play means specifically means you have some hosing in there, which there's always a balance with how much you hose players, but there's a hose over fire because that is what your players would do. But also you end up being like, what will my players do when I present this environment? And I think the difference between the theoretical adventure and the real adventure is that the theoretical adventure often isn't paying attention to what players end up doing, whereas like there are things in it was in my NAP 3 entry group which Grutzy played in, where I was like, and Grutzy may, if he ever reads it, spot these, where I was like, I need to add this in because my players have just done something. So, like I needed to pay attention to the stuff they were doing or would do, and I thought, yeah, in that sense, the immersive sim destructible environment was a sign of actually, what knowledge of what players do, and that's an incredibly valuable thing in a adventure site, whatever. So yes, I think worth noting that one. Grutzy's right.
Yeah, and again, you should know, my players also were playing with fire a little bit once they got on the inside. Of course, I have weather tables too, and they encountered it in kind of soaking rain, which stopped their initial temptation. But it's exactly what Owen says. It's a good sign of somebody who's actually thinking through using it in play. The practical side of things is always important when you're looking for an adventure site, especially because that's something you are there. Who knows when they'll encounter it, and it's really handy to have it really quickly on hand.
I put in the piece about it being self-repairing because I knew, again, like anyone that tries to hack through it, um, I wanted there to be a way for the dungeon to sort of regenerate itself, and it's also part of that creepy factor. I think one of the reasons spiders work so well is because there isn't any setup. All you have to do is tell someone there's a gigantic spider in front of you, and they're already going to be creeped out by that. And then to try to interact with the dungeon, but then notice, hey, these little spiders come out and they start repairing the damage you've just done. I think that just helps add to all of that.
Yeah, it's also a really, really great way. It again shows that you think in terms of actual play and like a coherent world. Because in other dungeons, it might be like you leave the dungeon, you come back, and it's magically repaired. But here, players can actually see, yeah, there's an in-game reason why stuff happens here, and that points to a coherent world, that you think about the world you're playing in more terms than like a simulation, or like Owen said, in a theoretical way. This when I first read it or first saw it, I thought this could be one of those one-trick quirky dungeons, like, oh look, it's a spiderweb dungeon. Oh, how funny. And then I read it and was, no, it's not like that. It's a really, really good dungeon with really, really good mechanics behind it that really gives you everything you need to run it. And it's not just a one-trick pony, like it's not like some show thingy.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
So we're going to continue to be in Spider World, going to the next one, which is Lipley's Tavern by Grutzy, one of our own judges. You should note, for the sake of its inclusion, no judge was allowed to vote for their own dungeon. So there were 5 judges all voting, and Grutzy's dungeon was not given its own points. So that means the rest of us were impressed enough to bump it up into the top 8, just from the quality alone of it. Several of us did actually submit our own adventure sites, and it's helpful to have that submission so you're also sympathetic to everybody else's problems. And we are, of course, going to go into the fact that this is, I believe, in 3-point font. He might have hacked the computer system to make it in 2-point font. Grutzy stuffed Lipley's Tavern. But the grumble about font size aside, it is also a really excellent, really high quality dungeon. It just plays really well from what I can see, and I know some people here have played in it. It just has a wonderful mixture of charm, there's intrigue, there's variety, there's factions. The map is fantastic, although also a little wonky. There's a little bit of a catty cornerness. It's hard to map, but it really has a wonderful geometry to it. There's just solid game design throughout the entire thing. Grutzy, what inspired you for this one?
Yeah. Um, it's kind of funny. Basically the idea came to me that if I had to point at one specific thing, when I learned about your contest, I started looking around for inspiration stuff. I wanted to do something funny, something new and fresh. And I came across actually a virtual tabletop map of Bag End, Bilbo's Hobbit Hole, and it was beautifully done. Like you could pop this up on a computer screen and your players would have fun. And then I thought, no, they wouldn't, because you actually never have to use a tactical map of Bag End, because you'll never pop it into your game. You get what I mean? It's even if you put Bag End in your game, it's a safe space. There's no dungeoneering done there. So I was kind of miffed that I had this beautiful virtual tabletop map found that I would probably never use. And that got me thinking, like, well, what about a Hobbit hole you actually can dungeoneer in? And that was, I think, the core idea. And there came a lot of stuff from other places, but that was like the starting point that got me into the whole thing.
Just to be clear, I have yeah, I actually have my own Bag End dungeon adventure, and it is better than Grutzy's, but no, you can't read it. That's my opinion. Yeah. Yes. Sorry, Commodore. I was so raring to go in giving Grutzy the talking to he needed. I ranked this, I think, pretty high from memory. I did this a lot. I think it is weird in terms of joking aside about the font thing is the limits for competition. That what about something that's a large adventure site or a very small adventure? And this falls into that category. It's not really a big proper. It's not a 16-page adventure or something. It is a large site or a very small adventure. But I think it kind of fell between those stools. But it has so much stuff in it, and the fact that again, the setup, I think I appreciated, and I know that I think in Commodore's campaign, this is how it's set up as well, as you're using it as an intact tavern, aren't you, Commodore? But the fact that you are like, hey, this is what it's like before it's burned down. This is what it's, there is an assumption of this is what this place was, which does mean you can use it as part of a living campaign with timetables, with events, and again, like that makes it as long as it fits the flavor of a campaign, it makes it very usable in a campaign rather than kind of needing to have a reason for this thing to be there. You have the reasons in the adventure, and again, that I think makes it really usable. I think the flavor was very strong. I think there's ghosts to help or whatever or exorcise. There's factions. There's secret tunnels and ways round. There's an kind of assumption of an above ground environment as well, and the area around the tavern to some degree. Like, what is this area? And I think that all makes it partly, and this is not a gaming thing, but it makes it a pleasure to read. You're like, oh, that's fun. I enjoyed that. Gave me ideas, but it's more than that, because you could do that with lots of things that aren't very useful in the game. It's also that I think it was. It felt like you could just drop into a campaign as, oh, here's the local halfling tavern, or it was at least, and players will like that. Players connect with this, a trope they understand and know. And it's the fact that it's not just mechanical form, but it's also thematic substance matters, and players being able to catch hold of, oh wow, this is Bag End. I wonder what's underneath it. I think that was really successful.
Yeah, the flavor was really strong. And yes, I actually do have Lipley's Tavern in my game currently. and I'm rolling every month to see when the fire that strikes will happen. Although, since I run a big open table game, my team, I'm on a team. I'm the main one, but my co-GM has actually kind of claimed it, and he starts all of his parties out there because that's near where his dungeons are. I think he'll be keen to run it too, just because it's fun. There's only two judges of this one since Grutzy didn't judge his own, but we also have Giant Goose right here, who believe just ran it. If you had any questions.
Yeah, so I ran this at North Texas RPG on recently. I was asked/forced at gunpoint by Gus to do so.
We like
And
our guns. What can I say?
exactly.
What, the South Oklahomans?
Correct. Oh,
I'll let that one slide for now.
Look at that. Look at that. All right.
You'll have to. I might have to say some things you'll have to cut out of the podcast if he continues along that line, though. But but yeah, it was a fantastic romp. It for the record, anyone looking to run something for a con game fits in perfectly in a 4-hour slot. You can pretty much see it all. So the things I liked about it is all of the ring of hands and gnashing of teeth about like 3-point font or whatever aside. Like this is what I'm looking for in terms of like information density plus being able to be easily used at the table. Like I think it is legitimately a like maybe masterwork is too nice of a compliment, but like it is a very good example on how to convey dense information like succinctly. And something that I think was a highlight of this that not a lot of other adventures I've read or played get right is that everything related to flavor has like a mechanical component to it. For example, like the webbed up windows, for whenever people inevitably want to like break through like the webbed up windows and like the spider part of the complex, there's rules for that. You're sneaking down in the chimney. Okay, there's some mechanical stuff in it, that and it all ties together to be part of a nice cohesive whole. You're gonna have a huge pitched battle out in the hallway. Okay, that's gonna attract people from these rooms. Luckily, on the map, there's like a brief like who's in what room thing. So even when you're looking at the map, when you're running the game, everything about this helps facilitate running it. So it was despite it's not one of those things that's like labyrinthian in nature and like difficult to understand. Um, Potentially due to the fact that he wanted to be, put in all of this stuff and there's the 2-page limit. There's nothing extraneous or useless. I'm thinking of like the larders in B1, in Search of the Unknown with the like, number codes about grain and all this stuff that's not going to matter to like 99% of people playing it. Like everything that's there matters, has antecedents. There's even some of the more valuable mundane things in there is like a linen that weighs like 40 pounds. So encumbrance even will slightly matter when you're exfiltrating. I think it's really tight. It's fantastic. Definitely worth including. And I think because it's so easy to like if you can read 2 pages, which if you're running a campaign, I like to imagine you can. Like if you can read 2 pages, this is just as easy to slot in due to like all the little things Grutzy did to make this work. It's just as easy to slot into your campaign as one of the shorter sites, in my personal opinion, because you're probably going to have halflings, you're probably going to have a region with hills, you're probably going to have somewhere where a bar could have burned down. Like it's fantastic. The one thing I will mention is that there is a radical difference between like the 2 halves of the dungeons in terms of like their lethality. So that could be nice for people getting too complacent about slaughtering the enemies on one side of the dungeon, reaching the spider portion, and then getting slaughtered in turn. So that's just something to be aware of for any future DMs running this. You should run it to keep that in mind.
Yeah. I think there's an interesting thing there that seems worth reflecting on, which is that when in the layout wars, which have claimed many lives, but in modern kind of old school gaming stuff, but stuff that actually matters, like Gritzy's layout text wise is bordering on the obscene because it's so tight and so small. But stuff that actually matters, and that a GM who actually ran an adventure was like, oh, the fact the map is really well annotated, that seems worth kind of just drawing out as a lesson, is that some layout that mattered in practice was being able to read a map quickly and understand, and it tell you stuff you need to know. And I definitely get that. I'm not sure, like, it's something I probably need to improve on and learn, but I'm like, oh yeah, actually having maps that tell you the information you need does help. You know, when they say who's in the room, or they set well marked traps, even stuff like that, that you know, oh, that trap is there. I don't have to go to the key and read like 4 paragraphs to find out what's in that room. So yeah,
it's exactly like that, because of the fact that, you know, it's 2.5 point font, you know, and whatever, everything's so dense. There is but despite all that, there's still the information being referred back to. And even what you said about like, oh, can look at a glance, see the traps. The like spider portion of the dungeon has these, you know, unique attributes, and the dungeon map being like color coded lets you know, like, you open this room, you know, web hell begins. Like, good stuff all around. Like, I legitimately think the only like quote unquote technology for like ease of use at table that isn't present is like listing out the HP of individual enemies in each room. So tut, only a 4.9 out of 5 for you, young man. But it was, yeah, all in all, like, I don't think I could chill this one any more than I already am. Good stuff. Go run it.
Thank you for the very, very kind words, and also thank you for your the play report and review you put up on your blog.
Oh, I did do that. Yeah, good stuff.
It's also on my list on my Mortimion campaign. I'm also running an open table of Mortimion, you know, the mega dungeon for the 3 LBB by Melan. And it's really funny because the group has developed a relationship with a Hobbit merchant, and it was really the Hobbit wanted to send them into a quest, and so I was thinking about what I'm gonna do here, and then I found your adventure, Grudzi, and it was perfect. I just reskinned the son of Lipley, you know, into my Hobbit, and that was it. So it's on the list, and I know the player will go. I don't know when, but they will go soon.
Shoot me a message when they enter. I'd love to hear what happens there. Also, as a small note, like Commodore, he put it in his campaign, but in his like original state before the fire, and that is something while writing I never actually imagined. So this kind of blew my mind when he told me that. Like, I was like, oh yeah, you could do that, right?
That's weird, because that's definitely something I took away from it when I was reading it. I was like, oh yeah, because you explained it before, so I was like, oh, you could just have that in your campaign. I think obviously you really did put that in there, Grits, even if you didn't realize.
Yeah, it was not a conscious decision. I mean, I like to be thorough with my stuff, as anyone who've read it can attest to. I think that's also, like Goose said, with the mechanics for everything. That's like kind of harkened back to Scott's dungeon. Well, I like there to be consequences, and I like there to be help for the DM. Like, you put a window in a wall, you should have rules how to break that window. Now, most rule books give you those rules, but if it's a specific situation, you should put it in the adventure to make it easier to use. And that was kind of like a bottom line for me, that everything that goes in there should be of some use to the DM. And like, I think about 70% of the criticism I got from people around the about the tavern was like, I can pin on Commodore because he only gave me 2 pages.
I'll throw in my own praise about the map, because map making is what got me into D&D as a young person. I love to draw and make these kind of maps, and when I saw that was part of D&D, that really sucked me into the game. So the very first thing I do whenever I look at an adventure is I look at the map first. I don't read anything, and without reading a word of the adventure, I was completely sold on this just based on the map. It's terrific.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking on that, my experience from Goose running it, one of the things I absolutely love is where a DM doesn't actually have to throw really any hooks at all at the beginning, especially a con game. The map itself is the hook. What I mean by that is you're basically already on a hill with 7, 8 different chimneys of egress into the site itself, and then 2 other actual main doors, right? So you, just as players, when you're like, how are we going to come at this thing, it answers that question in a number of ways, and we were just super excited to find different ways to get in. So I love map hooks where you don't even the DM doesn't even need to bother giving you like some type of story hook or some type of background hook to go at it. You just see it, it looks awesome, and you want to go check it out.
Yeah, I think I counted it once. There's like, I think, 25 ways into the tavern if you take all the windows, the chimneys, the doors, and stuff in it. It was actually when I played it the first time, my first group was like kind of like paralyzed by the choices because they couldn't decide to take a door, a chimney, or a window because everything kind of looked same to them from the outside. And that was a problem I hadn't really anticipated. Regarding the general map, I mean, it's a horror to map that I accept. It's Goose already told it to me, but I also
22
want.
points of egress. Just count it. Yeah, 20.
There you go. There you go.
Okay, I the map is not the traditional like square rooms on the grid map, of course, and I wanted to do something different here because I wanted to kind of capture the feeling of a hobbit hole in the map. That's why there are these like 3 curved passageways going into rooms and stuff like that. Yeah, but it's a horror to map. That's on me.
So I was just gonna say we had a good time trying to have those conversations. I loved having those conversations with the group at the table. How are we gonna go at this? Who's gonna do what? I don't know. That just makes for exciting Dungeons and Dragons in my book.
Yeah, it's always kind of a question. There is a very big difference between using a mapper and not. Sometimes some set up better than others for that. But that's one thing I was actually going to praise Danger again, just how well it worked with a mapper. The Legacy of the Black Mark was just great for that. My mapper gave something really clean and really clear. At a cap, I had to use a little bit more. I had to use a little bit more of my own, just because it's a non-linear section. Both are good. It's actually good to have a variety when you're doing adventure sites. We were probably going to go on to Goose's own entry first, but Owen, I know, has to leave. Is there anything last you wanted to say? Any final insults for Gritzy?
No, I mean, I'll be around for one more site if only to cleanse my palate.
Well, going back to Goose, his was a bit more controversial because the Glen of Shrikes, like I said, is a hex. Um, it conformed otherwise to the requirements. It is 2 pages. It does have 1 page of maps. Inside the hex, there are multiple sites, and the sites all interrelate to each other. So it's sort of a single big mega site that also has a lot of little mini sites within it. The reason why it did get in, though, is, despite this, I think everybody actually knocked maybe a point or 2 off because of that. But what is there is very creative and very interesting. Everything there, I'm not just talking about using psionics, which whenever Gus and Josh do want to do a CAG episode entirely about psionics, they need to invite Goose on. But also, just there is a ton of interesting gameplay that is happening whenever you're going through this Glen of Shrikes hex. The titular giant shrike tree has, it's a giant shrike bird that has all kinds of humanoids on it. There's wood elves in this area that are causing all kinds of horrid elf problems. There is a hermitage, and the hermit hates the elves. So there's a lot of back and forth, and it doesn't at all assume that you're going to approach the area in one particular way. There's a lot of potential action that's happening in this hex as you wander in. It's actually kind of how I would say a granular 1 mile divided 6 mile hex should probably be done, because there's just so much activity that goes in between the individual elements of this hex. It really was a very good job. Owen, did you have any thoughts on it before you have to go?
I voted this high. I don't, just double checking. I think it was maybe my number 2. or something like that. I thoroughly enjoyed the I thought I didn't mind that it wasn't an adventure site strictly. Oh no, it's my number one. Well done, Goose.
Oh, thank you. Wow.
Yeah. But it was Reverso. That's why Lipley's managed to make my top 8 too. So I think that means yours was technically my worst. But yes, no, it was my number one, and we said, I think it's interesting. By the way, we're talking about like we want stuff for play, but flavor does matter for that, because telling players, now we're going to do the dungeon number 18 with puzzles 7 and 12 like isn't fun, whereas being like, oh man, we're going to go to a weird burnt out hobbit hole or whatever is cool. There's some cool stuff, by the way. I should say deep cut monster use stuff like Gringlings from HU2 and 4 by Anthony Husso, Ed Greenwood's monsters from the Creature Catalogue, which are the Creature Catalogues are great sources of AD&D monsters that weren't collated in other books. So I thoroughly, and there's also a fight on reference. But yeah, so just some really good material. Sarnix is fun. I don't know if, maybe the question about how much there is, how overstuffed it is. It's a 6 mile hex, so each of these is essentially in a 1 mile by 1 mile area or something, each of these sub areas. But the actual stuff is very cool. Like there's magical trees with laughing pears on them. There's a mini dungeon, like a very small dungeon in it, which is in the obelisk, isn't it? Like there's a secret door in the obelisk that you can go into. A precursor race, pale bodies with pink hair. So yeah, there's just lots of cool, flavoursome stuff that has a really strong Baroque vibe. And they're very dense as well. You were saying Goose was complimenting Grutzy on his minus 17 point text. But I think there's a similar thing here. It's not as small, but the idea that you have a bit like Melan. Melan's very good at this, actually, but like a hex or whatever that just has a paragraph and some stat lines that you can immediately use, and it tells you the magic, the items, the treasure, the magic items, the reactions. And you think each of these is something which, if you just had to entertain your party for an hour, do you know what I mean? Like, it sounds like a funny way to put it, but imagine the job. Lots of people D&D kind of is this, actually, isn't it? They're just assuming they're gonna just turn up and have entertainment. You think actually any one of these encounters could be such a good, interesting session that'd be much more interesting than whatever random 5e compatible adventure they've picked up. And so yeah, I think that makes it incredibly high value to me, because you could just use this as your setting for a while as your players wander around this. And it made me really interested in your whole Ebony Coast. Is that your setting? It made me interested in your whole thing.
Yeah, Ebony Coast is actually one of the Wilderlands settings.
Yeah.
Or one of the Wilderlands maps. Yes.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, no. But yes, it made me interested in what else you'd do. Which I think was why I rated it so high. And
That's an honor.
So well done. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good
Wow.
thing. Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. What did you think?
I didn't rate it quite as high as you, but I still liked it very much. I think I was one of the people who kind of put away some points because it was not an adventure site in the strictest sense, but still, there's a whole lot going on, and I really, really liked it. I liked the general vibe of the place. I liked that my 2 pages I got were packed with stuff. I always like that. um, yeah, and basically everything what Owen already said. This is a fun little hex. You can plop a group in. They will have a really, really good time. The players, maybe the characters, not as much, but them's the
There's a
breaks.
lot of dangerous stuff on it. Yeah, it is a dangerous hex. I think that was that was a criticism I did make in the video. A statement was that you're like, what level is the party going into this? There's like, oh yeah, we could just go and deal with these guys. We're like 2nd or 3rd level. We could do that. And then there's other stuff which isn't easily signaled. That's maybe the one thing. But then that's kind of fun as well, because players learn to kind of tread carefully. There's a lot of danger in it, I think.
Yeah, but none of it is like there's not like you go around a tree and you're dead. Everything is kind of like you can, if you're careful, you can manage, you can navigate the hex. Also about the point that it's like it's a 6 mile hex with what is it, 7 noted locations, a little mini dungeon. Yeah. I mean, it's an endless discussion of how much stuff do you put in a hex, and I've heard people advocate for like 1 hex, 1 encounter, and other people are like, okay, you have to put like 3 hamlets, 6 ruins, and 5 layers in every 6-mile hex. And I think for me, this kind of struck like a very fine and very nice balance, because it's like a wilderness hex at the edge of civilization. It's not like completely out there. You can reach it, but it's also not like civilized. It's not like there's a shop at every corner. And so these 7 points, they're all like, yeah, self-contained is maybe the wrong word, but each of the encounters you can play as one encounter. They have an interaction with each other, but there's also not like world-ending stuff, or like it's what I want to say is the encounters are just right for the hex. They are not too big, too grand. They're also not too small. They work phenomenally well together, I think. And if you plop this into your campaign, you'll have a fun hex with a lot of stuff going on that your players can explore at their leisure, and the danger it possesses.
I think I'd add on the note of that density of stuff. In a way, this is the reason when people are like, oh, it's not an adventure site, it's several. I see that as a compliment, and I think Gritsy's half given it as a compliment while also saying he docked points. Is that you don't get 1 adventure site in 2 pages, you get 7, and they're done kind of very compactly. And I think that's part of the value for me, was that you're like, yeah, this is just, there's so much here that you can immediately get going with. And one needn't kind of think, you can just imagine, everyone's read this, the kind of 15-page adventure with about 2 pages of actual game material and none of it's usable. And this is the opposite. This is like 2 pages and there's 7 things you can do. Yeah, that was, I guess that'd be my defensive goose on that. That is so just, that's good.
Right. I don't think he needs to himself at all. Obviously, it made it in. Like, we all liked
Unlike
it.
Gritsy.
It is a good thing. Yeah. No, he did good.
Yeah.
Well, although I did notice one other thing, Goose, you had a call for a D16 in this. That
What the
is
hell?
that is
How do I do
definitely
that? Give me a
reaching.
sec.
In your with your caw, the butterfly
Oh
sized
yeah,
ray
the bird. Yep.
arms.
Yep.
Yep,
A
they
sec. Let me
use
pull that
a
one up again.
D16 damage. That's
I
just
have a D16 that you can just buy them on the internet, Commodore.
I know, but that's definitely going to confuse people.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
minus
Yeah.
DKP. Come on.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm not gonna lie. So I I had a brief, very, very brief infatuation with DCC. And so sometimes I still try to find uses for the strange dice. And so sometimes I just write in like, I want a little bit up from this, a little bit less than this. So, in my own personal notes, there's a lot of like D14, D16 tables, that sort of thing. So that's the let's see. The only other way I can defend myself with that is that if you're rolling up from scratch a psionic character for the big table of disciplines and all that, that's a D24 table, and that's like a D12. Roll another dice. If it's odd, add 12. If it's an even, don't add 12 to that. So you can just do that with a D8 and a control die. It's fine. It's a non-issue. You still can do this with platonic solids. No, I totally get where you're coming from there. With that one though. So I'm tickled pink to hear the Milan kind of comment, because anytime I write up my own notes like to use for a session, I pretty much just ape like Echo's stuff. Like how Echo, like, in any of his zines, like format their encounters and stat blocks, and how he writes his hexes, all that sort of stuff. And so I guess this was also kind of my tribute to him in a lot of ways, because someone somewhere when this was going on was commenting like, okay, there's a lot of dungeons, but where's like the cities or wilderness adventures? And so I thought like, oh, okay, bet, let's get her done. Which was kind of my impetus for writing this one. Part of it was I was at the beginning stages of a campaign, and the druid, I was realizing like, okay, the druid probably needs someone to train with, and I bought HU4, and I wanted to be able to like have some feelers for that, like out in the campaign setting. So there's several things here that connect to like planar shenanigans and astral plane type of so this was kind of like um my rough notes on like the on a setting um and could end up eventually getting to other things I wanted to. I put this in between um like a like a castle keep and a town. So this would be some like a road that I imagined players would go on, so that they would kind of always just have something to do when going from A to B. Um, the Unfortunately, this was one of those things that was a campaign that was kind of like, you know, died at a young age due to scheduling issues. So, like, for example, the obelisk was never raided, and a lot of the play involving this hex was basically running away from the random encounters in the house, and uh, not trusting the obvious werewolf traps, that sort of thing. Yeah, there's definitely a um, wide spectrum of challenge level, I suppose. Like if you go into the obelisk and you don't have several +1 weapons at bare minimum, you're not going to touch the elemental. You're going to die a horrible death, etc. If you try to attack the druid, you're probably going to die a horrible death without clever planning. There's plenty of stuff you read an early Judges Guild module and Borshak's Lair. You got a enemy magic user with level 7 spell scroll on him. It's for characters a level 1. Yeah, so I'll take that a little bit some of that in stride. I'm personally, I guess, kind of on reflection, thankful for the Milan comparisons and that sort of things. But I did view this for next year. I'm definitely going to aim to write something a little bit more focused. I'm going to try to figure out between now and then how much information I can pack in on 2-3 pages while not pissing off EOTB and Owen like that much. But you know, that'll be my plan. I'm very thankful for the positive comments. And I'll lastly say that if you use some sort of Excel tracker for keeping track of points, psionics is really not that bad.
Absolutely.
Bring up two quick points about yours that I really liked. I'm a big fan of hex crawls, so if I was a judge, I would not have deducted anything for this being a hex. I think that's perfectly acceptable for a quote unquote adventure site. Um, I didn't realize that this was set in the Wilderlands, but it's exactly how it read to me. I used to love the old Judges Guild stuff with like the lurid layers, where they would just have a sentence or two that was so evocative, and you could immediately spin out an adventure just based on a couple of sentences in their pieces. And this, when I was reading through this, it's exactly what it reminded me of, was someone taking a couple of those sentences and blowing them out into a few paragraphs that immediately translate into a full blown adventure. And the other thing I love that you did was, I'm a big fan of sort of malevolent or malicious elves or dwarves, because it really throws players off. When they encounter them, they immediately assume that these are allies, but when they turn out to be not so nice, that can really throw a party for a loop. So I appreciate that you sort of took the old school approach to elves not being particularly friendly to people. That was a nice twist on.
Yeah, it's really good stuff, and we'll definitely talk about maybe there was an extra layer. You did have one extra mark on the map that says put layer here, and maybe you can have that as your layer. A layer that I thought just worked perfectly for the adventure site, kind of almost ideal, was Pliny's Barrow Shrine of Corruption. This was a much more simple site than some of the other ones we've talked about, but he said it's a BX adventure site for cautious low level characters. I ran it myself. It was actually the first of the adventure sites I ran it. I had it a little higher in a little higher level area, which worked out quite well. Um, there's something just wonderfully haunting about the introduction, which has this misty barrow kind of running out of it just kind of rises out of the forest. And on the door, there is a crucified raven as the intro, which I actually think is probably my favorite single bit of introducing a single adventure site we have. There's just something that says, "Hey, come here, there's adventure." I thought it was a really good setup there. The Bear Shrine of Corruption has it's a fairly simple map. We might want to get into the fact that it is vaguely anatomical looking, but it does have the burrow kind of raising out of the ground. There is at the top a hideous idol. You come in, you just see the two glowing eyes of gems in it, which are valuable. There's a pit, there's spiders again. There's just everything in it that sets up great. And then we had a nice frantic time with my players after they got ambushed, and one of the people got trapped down by spiders in a pit trap, and then they decided to use that huge aforementioned statue to crush the spiders. It sets up just good for adventure. My instinct when I read it was that it was going to play really well, and as soon as I played it, it definitely played great. Pliny, what was your inspiration for this one?
I was looking at the BX Black Widow spider, and it's special abilities involving like sticky webs, and it's like, okay, well, I was just gonna walk into a web, so I started thinking about trapdoors and like trying to have like a very more like vertical dungeon where people are gonna fall into the web, and the dungeon kind of came up around that, and yeah, so I just kind of wrote it up, and the Barrow part and the Dead Raven all were inspired by. I'm running a Barrow Maze campaign, so one of the Chaos Gods was has a Raven theme, and um, yeah, so yeah, stuck it in a barrow, and had my players go forth and conquer, and yeah, it went pretty well.
So you did playtest this one as well, right?
Yes,
How did
yes,
they handle it?
I did. Well, so what they ended up doing, they were kind of, I think in retrospect, I made the big idol with the gemstone eyes a little too. It's kind of a too obvious a trick to get them to wander into a pit trap. So they were being very cautious and just kind of very slowly approaching and just kind of checking everything out. So I had the gnolls ambush them, and they kind of shifted into like tunnel fighting against the gnolls. They wiped them out, and got their treasure, and basically looked at and after that was done, they kind of proceeded cautiously. I think they triggered the pit trap, and you know looked down, and said, they want nothing to do with that. I think the thief, well, kind of sidled around it and popped the gemstones out, and they got the hell out of there. So even though the spider was the introduction, or like the kind of the formative idea behind the dungeon, they didn't actually ever meet them. Um, so I was quite pleased to hear that Commodore, your players found it, and I didn't even think of tossing the idol in there to crush the spider. That was pretty brilliant. I was very pleased to see that it was being used in a way I hadn't even thought of. But yeah, in retrospect, it was like, oh yeah, of course, duh.
All of this is what kind of sets up when you have a vertical site. The map is somewhat simple, but the fact that it has a lot of verticality in it, really, even a very linear map when it's up and down adds a lot more gameplay. I said something similar to Scott with Etacap's cottage because there's that up down. They had somebody with a flight access in their party, and that kind of changed a lot of the way they could potentially approach it. Any kind of vertical site gets a lot more gameplay that just sort of emerges from it. I love seeing that. Gritzy, did you have anything you wanted to ask or see on that one?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of already answered the question, because I would have asked were the nulls there from the beginning, or were they put in like kind of a reaction, or as a mechanism to put people towards the spiders. But I think you already answered that. Other stuff is, I mean, yeah, okay, map. It's a smaller site, but I can definitely get behind it. I think I ranked it. Yeah, it was my place 3 actually, because the vibe was pretty awesome. I mean, Dead Raven nailed to a door, and the little shout out you get into the text, like, where is it here? Who can resist opening a door in the earth with a dead bird nailed to the front? There's a man who knows his audience. that tells you everything you need to know about what's coming now. um, I love the verticality, the shaft. I love the whole like setup because it's kind of like layered for me. So you got the party comes in and sees the barrow mount. Okay, dead raven at the door. Ooh, okay, we've got to get in there. They go in and first nothing happens, but big fucking idol at the end of the room. Everyone's cautious because there might be a trap. Then the nulls come out. Second layer, you've got nulls coming out, but they can interact as tactics. They rise one after the other, so you can interact with them. You can flee or you can push them or you can like fight to death. But the nulls don't want to kill you right now. They push you, and then maybe you interact with the spiders. It kind of like unfolds in layers, and that's what I really really liked about it. It's not just like you go in, there's a trap, you try to interact with the trap, but there's always new stuff coming in. Even if they defeat the nulls, they go into the lair and um, can explore like eight other rooms there, and then maybe still meet the spiders or not, depending on what happens. So it's flexible. It's small enough to put it basically anywhere. I think I put it on my map already, but players haven't yet found it. But yeah, I was really impressed by the like the size to content ratio of the dungeon, because it's one of the smaller sites, but it packs a punch. The vibe was awesome, and I really really like this layered approach, that there's stuff happening, there's tactics happening, and even if one thing doesn't work out, there's other stuff happening in the dungeon.
And what I didn't mention, probably should have, is I love the fact that you had not one but two hooks to go to further adventuring. The spiders have webbed up a robber, who has, you can talk with, you can interact with, you can also offend. So there's some potential issues with the bandit that can, you can both use him as an ally, he can be something that is a hook or a rumor. But then also you had, as part of your treasure in the junk room, almost like as an aside, you had 6 clay tablets that were valuable. So they're treasure, they're valuable to a wealthy occultist, which is great. But that you mentioned that there was a second unholy thane deeper in the wilderness as part of it, and that was perfect. That was brilliant. I loved having an adventure site that has an open ended. Hey, there's more hints to come. I actually had the second unholy thane be the legacy of the Black Mark site. So the party that found the Bear Shrine of Corruption, they actually got the hints towards there was something else. There's something else valuable, another place to loot, and that's where they hit. Yep,
I'm going to steal that idea.
you should. But thank you for putting that in there as just sort of a hint. It just linked them together so beautifully, and they both have the similar speed. The idol actually flavored slightly more like the spiderish look that the Legacy of the Black Mark had, and everything just worked together beautifully. It's giving those kinds of open-ended invitations to add more content, because the GM often will have their own adventure site they want to kind of indicate. And I thought that was really working really good. You should feel good about that one.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like just an easy way to kind of, spruce things up, because all you need is like one sentence, or or a couple sentences, just kind of, pushing outward, so it doesn't feel like this is the dungeons, or the adventure site is its own little universe. So yeah, it's just I think it's a great way to make things pop. Yeah. And one more comment as far as verticality goes. Man, I didn't really realize this until I had drawn the map, but yeah, drawing those vertical maps is a pain in the ass. Because you have to draw, you want to draw like a side view, and then you want to draw like, in my case, I wanted to draw like top down views of the dungeon as well, and it's yeah, not as easy as I thought it would be.
As a quick interjection of someone wanting to run this site in the near future, what level were the parties that were able to successfully come away from this area?
If I remember correctly, they were I think around level 3, so kind of not level 1, but it's starting to kind of push into towards the mid tier. But yeah, if I remember correctly, I think they were all around level 3. Yeah, no one died in mine. Commodore, did anyone eat it in your campaign, or?
No, it was APL. It was APL 4, which is about right, although it's pretty easily adjustable. Somebody came extremely close. One single save against poison away from dying. Actually, there was two. One single save against poison away from dying, and one person who had a single hit point from death from the falling into the razor sharp, nastiness below. But both were excellent. It's nice to have a nice threat there. So I guess we can go on to the winner. I'll just briefly mention the fact that Stussy couldn't make it. I also appreciated he was giving commentary to the reviews of almost every single site. He was very engaged. He is actually somebody who came in from JB's blog. He was clearly learning a lot of things, and his Fountain of Beck also has something that EOTB mentioned in his review, and I think it's something that should be mentioned more often. There's a Saints relic as kind of the single biggest piece of treasure from the Fountain of Beck, which doesn't happen nearly enough in AD&D, and it really should happen more often. It was a really well done site. But speaking of the man himself, the winning entry was the Lost Vault of Kadish by JB. It is a sandy one. There's nothing that I guess makes it strictly necessary to be in desert, but everything in the flavor is so extremely desert. You could do it as a not Egyptian, but it doesn't have to be not Egyptian. There's all sorts of sandy warlord areas that you could put it. I actually have already planned it as part of my next campaign, so not the current one I'm running. We'll have all kinds of nice black desert areas, and I've already inserted into that because it just works well as a nice. It has a tomb. Everything there is threatening. It just works in a very nice way. Everything in it is just flowing very smoothly. JB, what inspired you for this vault?
One of my pet projects right now is I'm rewriting the old Desert of Desolation series by the Hickmans, old TSR modules from the early 80s. And uh, first in that series was I3, the third intermediate module called Pharaoh, which is a classic Hickman module and one of their best ones they wrote before they actually joined TSR. And so as part of my rewriting of these adventures, I'm kind of trying to do them in a similar style, but make it a more open-ended adventure campaign. But I'm trying to create pretty much the same number of dungeon sites or adventure sites in those modules. And one of those sites in I3 is a sunken city that the player characters are supposed to stumble into and free an evil Efreeti that then goes on to destroy various peoples in the desert and becomes a story arc along the Desert of Desolation Railroad series, uh, forcing the players into certain actions. I don't I don't go in for railroads. So I'm trying to recreate these sites without having any kind of railroady elements to them, instead making a large desert environment that players can explore and find lost cities or lost tombs or dungeons that they can explore and people they can meet and people they can interact with, et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of a larger campaign that I'm trying to do in a three adventure series. So that's something that I had kind of on my wish list or my back burner of projects that I'm working on. And when your adventure site contest came along, I said, "Oh, maybe this would be a chance to do a small part of that." So I took the small sunken city dungeon that's just really a side note in I3 Pharaoh, even though it is a large part of the overall plot or story arc. And I redid it as the Lost Tomb of Kadish, or Lost Vault of Kadish, rather. And that was my impetus for it. That was my inspiration for it. The original adventure shows the players fall through a crack in a dome into a small sunken lair-like site. It has a few magical traps that people go through in order to unwittingly release this great evil Efreet on the desert. I didn't want to do that, so I made that just a side part of the overall adventure, which was a vault to some old magic user or someone who's just been entombed and lost in this deserty area. But that's my origin for the inspiration for the adventure.
Well, it definitely has great flavor. Actually, all these sites have had really distinctive flavor, and I'm not surprised that you had that as a bit of your inspiration. But it is its own site, very much so. Grutzy, did you have anything on that?
uh, yeah, it was the second. I mentioned it earlier. I got the chance to play test kind of two of these adventures before the adventure sites before we had to submit our rankings, and Lost Vault of Kadish was the other one. Um, yeah, works like a charm. I started my players in the oasis of Hisan Kadid. Sadly, no centaurs showed up, but they found the statue, took the spear, went into the desert, fought some scorpions. They had a rather funny way of doing things, uh, going into the main room, exploring a bit. They couldn't, for the life of them, figure out that they had to pour water on the eternal flame, which I just found jarring, but well, hey, that's the breaks. Uh, then they found the hidden teleport room where you get teleported if you try to break down that door, which they didn't. They broke down into room 9 and then kind of went backwards, found the room with the Huakuva, I think they are called. The cleric banished them. The Huakuva then tried to break down the door leading from 6 to 5, which I ruled would then teleport them to the room 8. So they had another funny. From their point of view, they just vanished and they went out because the time slot was cut short. And then we had an epic final fight against the Huakuva in the main hall. They sadly never made it deeper into the vault. But yeah, the site as written works like a charm. I think this is something that EOTB also mentioned, that it is not like a holy loopy-doopy Jaquate thingy. It's basically a straight line if you kind of discard room 4, I think it is, which is obviously kind of like a broken down corridor or something. But it's basically a straight line you have to go through, and that's kind of refreshing in its own way. And it works because it makes sense for like a vault or a tomb, that there's stuff in there and that you just go room to room and find out what happens. I also really, really, really like the whole like flavoring, like this little implied things. Um, the star room, I think it was the Vault of Spirits, the big room with the millions of little night sky stars. But if you take one of them, basically the whole chamber will start to flicker and yeah, stop working. I yeah,
Vault of Spirits, I think that's called. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, we all know what will happen in that room. I also love that you put just seeing this, that the room, the transition from room 9 to room 10, from the Vault of Spirits to the library. There's this, the door to 10 is locked, the key lost long ago. So there's just no solution there. That's a thing I have seen in many, especially newer adventures. Looking at 5e here, that you kind of have this puzzle mentality that you put a puzzle and you have to have a solution, but it's totally fine and completely like in character for her coherent world for stuff sometimes to just not work. And that's I think that's not the only time in this adventure that there's little things here and there that are just lost to the ages. So the players will start searching for a key, but there simply isn't one. But hey, you have a thief for that, or maybe you have a knock spell prepared or something like that. It's the same thing with the statue in the oasis that looks like a centaur, but if you take a closer look, you see that it was a human rider and was just weathered weathered down. All of this made it really interesting for my players to interact, because they had like a 15-minute discussion of at the table like, is it a centaur or is it a human, and what does it mean? What does this statue do? It points at the desert. So the hook alone, the statue alone is the best hook this adventure can get, and they were clever enough to take the spear with them. Yeah, and all those little things they combine to make a really, really, really good whole adventure, and works like a charm.
So that's amazing. I have to say I've had so I as I said, I'm just now in the process of writing the adventure that this will be a part of. This is just a small part of the overall adventure. And so part of the background or that the players have before they enter the desert is that there are these um, bands of savage centaurs, the centauri, and that they're supposed to be watching out for. So if they had that background from the overall adventure, like my players had, they might be a little more wary when they enter a an oasis that has a centaur statue in it, or appearing to be a centaur statue. I will say for my own playtesting, my players entered the oasis and they did encounter centaurs and barely escaped, and never followed up investigating the statue, though they also had found that the spear was removable and took it with them. So they never actually found the lost vault of Kadish. They traveled on into the desert farther. So it remains in my campaign an undiscovered adventure site, which is one of the things I wanted. I talked about the inspiration for the adventure. Other inspirations are my own inspirations that I put into this kind of thing. The tra- the door that opens with the eternal flame and the water thing. That's just I thought that was kind of an obvious little puzzle because you see things like that in movies, right? Like The Fifth Element or maybe the one of those Aquaman movies. I think they have to pour water on something to open some gate or something like that. I thought it was pretty obvious, but maybe it wasn't for people who aren't as into the B schlock cinema as I am. Um, the map that I created that you guys praise, that was not actually I did not my I have a real hard time drawing maps. A lot of times when I'm writing an adventure, I look for real world blueprints of temples or tombs or castles or whatever it is that I'm trying to create an adventure site for in order to give me a good feel for what the layout of a place would be. And in this particular case, I just said, I asked my 9-year-old daughter, can you just make a map out of this? And I just squiggled some lines on a piece of paper. And she was the one who actually kind of put rooms there and stuff. And then I just cleaned it up and turned that into my adventure site. So my daughter, who is credited in the adventure, is the one who actually drew the map, at least the original version of it, which I added maybe a tunnel here or there. Um, but it was designed to be more of a. It wasn't. It was. I just wanted to be something that was not very symmetrical looking. Something that was more of a little more random, a little more strange. Uh, and that's how the map came about. Then stocked it using what I thought would be appropriate to the site. I'm really glad that your players had a good time in the playtest. I think I think it does invite a lot of different ways to approach or tackle it. There are ways you can brute force your way through things, and there are ways you can be a little more subtle with how you go through it. And I think that presents interesting choices to players. I have to say, I'm a little surprised after hearing the comments on the other dungeons or the other adventure sites in the contest. I'm a little surprised that mine came out on top uh, of all these others. So I'm curious, like, how close were the scores?
They were extremely close, actually, for the top ones. There were a lot of excellent adventures. There was a lot of good stuff. There were submissions too. We'd just be here all day if I had talked about all the other ones. I found some merit in almost everybody's, but I do know yours was very close. The top four were within just a couple points of each other.
Yeah,
Very, very
I have
close.
the picture here. It's like 2 points to the second place, and from there, I think 2 points to third place.
Yeah, I'm surprised given the quality. Yeah, there were some really good dungeons. I was just happy to have something that was short to work on, after working through Prince's last contest. I wanted something smaller to work on, and this was definitely a really nice change of pace. And the nice thing about these little two-page adventures is that the limits that are put on it, or the constraints, they help s- they help force creativity and they help structure creativity, right? It gives you the parameters that you can work with, and it forces you to self-edit what you would otherwise put into a thing. Like, I knew that I couldn't do more than, um I was going to just do, like, 10 encounter areas. I think it ended up being 11. But really, when you hit, like, 12 or 13, it's gotta be more than 2 pages to make sense, and so that I knew that it was going to have to be a small site. In my play testing, I found that I wish that I'd actually done a map of the oasis itself, because when the centaurs did come, I had to, like, scramble to, like, create, uh, terrain for the players to fight on. So that's something that I'll have to rectify in the final version of this.
Yeah, I agree with you completely about the format of the contest really providing a good sense of focus, and it does help you really sort of concentrate on the strengths of an idea versus my inclination is to start throwing out all these different pieces to it. When you have to carve all of those out, it really boils everything down to its sort of its primal nature. The other thing that, for me anyway, as a participant in the contest, that helped when I'm creating things for my players, I don't really have anyone that looks at it and evaluates how good it is in terms of playability or gameability. And when you throw something out there and you have other people, other DMs and other game designers looking at it, giving you positive feedback, it really makes you feel good about what you're doing at your own table. That was a big thing for me, was getting such a positive response to, again, what was ostensibly just a wandering encounter in my campaign. That gave me a lot of confidence to continue continue my own design principle.
I think also what is really nice about the format and the small focus adventure side, it's the usability and the ease of dropping them in your campaign, especially if you are running an X scroll, like I think a lot of us are doing. You have really the opportunity of using all of them. You can put them on your maps, and then your player will explore. Compared to a bigger adventure, it's more not difficult, but it require more work for you to include it in your own camping world, and it's more difficult. And also, okay, a bigger adventure, it will take you several sessions, so you will have less opportunity to use the whole content of the contest. And I really like small site for X-Scroll. So it's really nice. Really enjoy it.
Yeah, there's definitely something to be said about if you're using someone else's adventure, if you're using a module or something like the adventures that are given here on this adventure site. I think I've come to the a conclusion, but I've come to the current opinion that smaller is really better, just to be able to hold a whole concept in your head. That it's difficult to run an adventure if it's a really large, sprawling adventure, like something that, takes 100 pages to read just to prep. And well, of course, you can do something bigger than a 2-page adventure site. The larger it gets, and the more moving pieces that are involved in it, um, the trickier it is for a dungeon master to come in and um, put it together, get a good overall concept of what's going on, so that as they run it, the DM knows of what the consequences of certain actions are the players take. Oh, if they go here and kill this thing, then this is going to have this ramification in this other part of the adventure. With a smaller adventure, less moving pieces, less factions, less NPCs, less things going on. There's room for the players to get in. There's room for the DM's mind to grasp it all and then run it like a real world location for the players, which helps the players engage with it in the moment and have a better, a more visceral experience of adventuring, as opposed to waiting for the DM to figure out what chapter of this 20 chapter adventure that they're working on. That's something that's something I've been writing about lately on my blog, but I think I think it's really I think that's it's really helpful. We have a There are a lot of people who want to create adventures and they have a lot of great creative ideas and they want to use them all in the same adventure and then it ends up being a sprawling thing that isn't as tightly isn't as tightly put together as it could be, you know. And again, we're talking about adventure gaming, classic adventure gaming. That's what this podcast is about. And in adventure gaming, there's a lot of player agency. And so one of the ways that player agency shows up is players have the right to refuse an adventure too. They have the right to say,
Yep.
I don't want to go. I don't that burned out hobbit hole looks a little too dangerous to me. There's something going on there. I'm going to go somewhere else. And so having smaller sites as dangerous saying, you can put those down more frequently in your adventure. You can give your players more options. It takes less time commitment and effort from the dungeon master to prep something smaller. And then it just gives your players more agency to pursue their own agendas, to be proactive and engage with the setting. That setting being DM's campaign world.
Yeah, exactly what I mean.
Yeah, one thing I want to interject here is like you mentioned the big adventures and um, or like mega dungeons and stuff like that. And one thing for me that I really like about the adventure sites, the smaller adventure sites, is like you say, you can plop them down in your campaign, but they kind of grow together. I mean, Commodore has already hinted to this that he connected the Barrow Shrine of Corruption to the Legacy of the Black Mark, and I've done uh, similar stuff in my campaign world where like okay the people know there's St. Durham's home of the wayward youth is up there and stuff is going on there and it's somehow connected to the Fountain of Beck because they basically belong have a certain they have a certain connection, and that is something I really really like because when you plop a mega dungeon in your campaign world you have the mega dungeon or you have the big adventure in there, and then okay, there will be, of course, some variants, but it is this adventure that is in there now. But if you put like 6 adventure sites in there, they begin to kind of mesh together and at the table create the story you want to play, or rather create an interesting world. And it's different at every table because everyone puts down different adventure sites or simply connects them in a different way, and that is something you don't have if you like. I mean, I don't want to put down the adventure paths from Pathfinder or shit like that, but even if you put down like Stonehell in your campaign, that tends to dominate the area and kind of eat the story of the world, if you understand what I
Mhm.
mean.
Oh yeah, yeah. A large tentpole dungeon that, that's a particular play style that that a lot of people enjoy or ascribe to. It tends to it tends to dominate the world because there it is. It's there. We know it's there. We know that if we go down to level 8, we're going to find bigger fish to fry. We're going to find bigger treasure. What's the point or what's the purpose of looking elsewhere for adventure? And then you're not engaging with the world. Now you can offset that by saying, well, in your stone hell or whatever large dungeon, we have treasure maps to outside locations that take you on little side jaunts. That's one way to kind of offset it. But again, you still have this huge thing that sits there, the elephant in the room that is going to draw the attention of the players, which it stops the players from it doesn't stop, but it discourages the players from exploring the rest of the world. And for the dungeon master, part of the joy of running a campaign is in the creation of that world. And so you want the players to get out and explore it, not because you want to send them down your railroad, but because you're creating for the joy of creation, and you're creating for the joy of sharing that creation with others.
Players also appreciate completion. That's one of the things I found when I've created these sort of larger scale dungeons. They get tired of constantly banging their head against it. They wanna defeat it. They want to finish it and move on. And these little sites provide that good sense of, hey, we did something, and now we can move on to something different.
Yeah, absolutely. You want them to be able to do that.
Right, I was gonna say, where I have all these scattered around, I actually have a tentpole dungeon. The Cairn of Night, which, section of that was in the Noir Punk 3, that you had an episode about, Gus. That is the big tentpole dungeon of this particular archipelago. But I find the players love having the palate cleanser of, this, that, and the other. A lot of the balancing for that is to balance not only is there reward in the giant dungeon, but there's also reward every time you're exploring. And having adventure sites scattered around is its own reward. There is something to be said for, I think it was Angry GM was the one who first pointed it out. You can have all this big sprawling world. You can have a mega dungeon. You can have a hex crawl with hundreds of entries. And I have all of that. But you have to admit that every time somebody sits down at the table, there is, for one way or another, there is going to be a complete story. And I don't want to ever talk story game because it's what emerges, but everybody has a war story of what develops. And so it's really good to have an ongoing world with all kinds of big open-ended things. And what stays with you in any kind of campaign is that open ending. There's the fact that it's bigger than you are is a big deal, but it is also extremely satisfying to bump into a little barrow in the middle of the woods on your explorations. It has some mystery in it. You go in, you completely loot the place, you discover every secret of it. You maybe see some other things that point other places, and then you're done. There's a lot of satisfaction there, and I never ever want to design a game that is a story game or that tells a story. But for classic adventure gaming, it's great to have the mixture of big open-ended, sprawling hex crawls, sprawling mega dungeons, but also having little bitty onesie twosie layers. There's something very satisfying about that too. Something that emerges that is a combination of both of it, and that's why I love adventure sites.
Yeah, I was like, one of the things I really like about JB's specifically is, and all of these have the same elements. We've talked about how they can hook in to a campaign easily to get people to go to them, but also to the consequences that result from interacting with them. And so JB's has, you take stuff out, there are going to be consequences for the players, and those consequences are also telegraphed. In the library, there's a particular scroll that you can possibly pick up that would eventually telegraph what could be on your heels later if you walk out with certain pieces of treasure. That's a beautiful touch. And I love that. For me, choices and consequences, and the consequences that come from those choices, are what make adventure gaming unique and special to me, because they're ongoing. They're completely based on agency, which is the player's choice to do different things, and then the consequences result from those choices. is what creates that dynamic world. And we use emergent a lot, emergent, right? So that's what I really liked about the adventure sites is yes, they're beautiful little one-offs that you can just randomly run into. They're also beautiful places that a treasure map or some other hook can get you to go to. But just as important for me as a player and as a DM that I enjoy is the consequences from those choices of going there, the result that continue to hook into that world.
One of the things coming from another direction, but it was one of the questions Commodore posted. It's we can the use as a one shot for an adventure site, and that is something that for me is kind of useful because sadly in my real life circle, not much AD&D or even classic adventure gaming gets played. So when I sit down at a table with real people to play AD&D, it's mostly on conventions in the region where I live, which I manage to like 6 or 7 conventions a year. So for me to have like a catalog of small sites I can plop into a 4-hour slot is a really, really great asset.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Giant Goose running just recently in Nortex is a perfect example of that. There's multiple prongs, and Commodore and I actually talked about this the other day on voice chat. But basically, you've got the option to plunk it down for just a night's worth of D&D, right? Same thing. That's a con game, a day, 4-hour slot at a con for just a good time. Or in your hex crawl, right? You randomly roll up a location, an encounter, what have you. You can drop it right in there, or you integrate it fully into your campaign and it's just a site that you pre-populate. Like it literally serves all of those purposes and does them all very well. And that's why this type of content is going to be always valuable. It's not just for a specific scenario.
One thing I really appreciated about this is that this is the first time I've ever really put anything out there for public consumption as far as D&D goes. So
Same.
I mean, I mean, I look at stuff like Prince's Contest. It's like, oh, geez, I don't even know how to write all, starting with like a whole, dungeon entry for something like that is pretty intimidating. So this was a good way for me to kind of, uh, figure things out. And it's, it's very flattering to be, go from that to be, in the same rank as guys like BX Black Razor and, Commodore that have been doing this for a while. And yeah.
Hey, you beat me. I mean, mine's not in there, so we definitely have it. It's really good to have. It's really good to have the ranking. It's really good to have the reviews. I've loved. I've improved so much, not just running, but also writing from having the feedback. And I've had, Bryce Lynch is a champion for his 10-foot pole reviews, and he reviews a ton of work. And he's reviewed some of my stuff as best. He's also reviewed some of my stuff as, middle of the road. And I've actually gotten more improvement out of any time that was a middle of the road review. Anytime there was some good critique, I feel like I've grown more as a writer and also as just sort of an adventure designer from those critiques.
Yeah, criticism is definitely helpful. It can be constructive. It's your perspective, how you approach it, right? Are you gonna take it as a lesson to learn from, or just as you know, always just putting me down? You know, all the critique is useful. All the critique is helpful. Having 5 or 6 judges for this was wonderful to be able to see everyone's reviews of things and the different perspectives. What works for some judges didn't work for others, right? And they all had things to say, and where that criticism is consistent, where there's a consistent thread on something, you can say, "Oh, that's probably something I really need to work on." And where the criticism is not as consistent, you can say, "Well, that might be a matter of taste more than anything else."
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. It's basically we had 5 judges, I think we were, and when we looked at our final rankings of each judge, there was some good variance in it. Some people like there were some adventure sites that all could agree worked well, worked good, or something. But there were also some like outliers, like someone put this site very high while everyone else put it a rather low, or something like that. And while this might be constructed as a bug, I think it's a feature because you need to have a diverse yeah, you need to have this variance, and as JB just said, when you take it all together, you get useful information out of it, not just the judges themselves, but also the people who have taken part in the contest.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I will say, much as I love Prince of Nothing's nap contests, one of the drawbacks of it is it's one person reviewing all of the adventures there, right? So you have a subjective criteria of one particular individual. Now he is very well read. He knows his stuff. He has great idea of both what he likes and also of what makes it goes into making a good adventure, and he has this from actual playing experience. But it's still just one person. Whereas here you have five different people who all run games and know what makes an adventure run well, and that is very valuable to have. It really is to have the five different perspectives all chiming in. So, Fritzy, please finish your reviews so we can.
I'll try to get to it.
We're all waiting for the rest of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
No.
I kind of backed myself into a corner there because most of my reviews were like 2,000 words longer than the entries they because I
Right.
was a dumbass and decided to go really, really, really deep into the details of what I liked and didn't like, and then real life came knocking, and yeah,
Yeah.
I've Commodore's The Observatory still half written up, and I try to finish it if I can find the time.
Yep. Yeah. When you have the time. When you have the time. I'm sure he'll want to read what you have to say.
So I'm the man who broke you. So it sounds like you did a Lipley's Tavern on your own reviews by trying to squeeze 4 pages into a 2-page review.
Yeah, I'm kind of like I'm German. That's the first thing, and
Fritzy has his style.
yeah, and I tend to overanalyze things a lot. So I was like, when I review these things, I want people to take something away, and I mean, you can like Black Razor said, it mustn't be it doesn't have to be like all is well, all is good, but there has to be substance to it. Like I can tell you, oh, I didn't like that and I like that, but that really doesn't tell you anything. You have to, from my point of view, you have to argue from the system, from the adventure, and it's on its own merits. So simply saying, "Oh, I didn't like your adventure because I don't like spiders," that's of no value to anyone. But arguing, "Okay, spiders are deadly in this system, and you said your adventure is for level 2 and they don't have slow poison at this point, so there's a discrepancy here," which I obviously did in my adventure. But
I was gonna say that was my criticism of your adventure.
yeah,
I
and
think.
it's a good criticism because it told me something. That's why I picked it up. That's the point I'm making. It's basically like you said. You can tell the person, yeah, I like it or I don't like it. But in my reviews, I try to go into the details and argue them from the system, from the classic adventure gaming style, from the adventure or the adventure side itself, and try to be fair, but also point out, okay, I don't think that doesn't work, and here is why I think it doesn't work, but then they tend to get rather long. Also, I talk and write too much.
I was going to say, you notice all of us judges did have one criteria that was consistent amongst a lot of us was we were all looking for usability. One thing we all do think is we all run games and we all are looking for something valuable. I'll plump. Vance Adkins he was one of the ones he turned it in. Whatever happened to Brother Eustace was his entry. He didn't quite make the cut, but we all liked it. I think all liked his little adventure site. But I'll actually plug his blog is like Leicester's Ramble. He does an excellent job of showing his play reports. Are he goes to a bar with a big folder of adventure sites that he's come up with. He just has a big old stack of adventure sites. He has the BX rules right in front of him, and he just has an open table at the bar every 2 weeks. And the people who show up, they're going to play and they're going to bumble around. They have a world. They bumble into this adventure site or that adventure site. Some of them are higher qualities than others, but the important thing is they all play. They all are going to try to get some sort of play out of it. There's a lot to be said for the classic adventure style that is just let's bumble, let's see what happens, let's play, let's try to loot things. I really admired that. I liked him. I just wanted to compliment him because he did a really good job on his blog of actually showing the practical. We really love high creativity, high detail dungeons like the Nap dungeons. They're really great. I get a lot of inspiration from a lot of it. I get a lot of education from a lot of it. But D&D in a lot of cases is just, hey, we're all going to sit down, we're all going to sit down here at this bar table. We're all going to roll dice. We're all going to loot this random tomb or this random little shrine. We're all going to poke around here. We're going to figure out what happens. And, you want to talk about story gaming. A lot of the problem is they just are trying to make a story first and foremost, when the actual appeal of classical adventure gaming is these adventure sites. It is using it doesn't even have to be great. I mean, everything that's in this compilation are great, but I would recommend anybody who listens. I mean, I'm going to be having this contest again. I would love everybody to turn it in, everybody who's listening. I love reviewing these things. I love the use out of these things. But even if you don't get selected, it's just a wonderful exercise to build these little sites. It's a wonderful exercise to not just get the reviews on it, but the process itself of learning, hey, so I've got 4 slightly drunk guys. We have this simple BX. Everything here, well, what are gonna happen? They bumble into this. What's the gameplay gonna happen for the next 2 to 3 hours? There's a lot to be said for just looking at it as something to play. Enjoyed having Adventure Side for that.
Yeah, that's really a great point, man. And what I think that some of the people who and I don't want to turn this into any kind of indictment of the art punk scene or anything, but the idea or the thought that an adventure needs to be creative, needs to be original, needs to have a gimmick or be weird or whatever, in order to be a good adventure. I think that's not accurate. I think that's an inaccurate thought. It just has what's more important than anything is that it's playable. I mean, players are going to approach things based on what their character class is, what the makeup of the characters of their party is. That's how they're going to approach the adventure. And it doesn't it's not so important to the average adventure gaming group, whether it's an incredibly creative or original story idea. What's more important to them is if it's something that they can grasp and wrap their head around. So I think that perhaps the DMs who have to read and write and create adventures are the jaded ones, not the players. Players are happy to, fight some monsters and find some treasure and locate the occasional secret door, avoid the occasional trap. You know, they want something that's playable, that's gameable, that engages their attention. And we blow out of proportion, perhaps, this idea that it has to be something that's not a standard trope. Well, sure, avoiding standard tropes is good. Avoiding the standard stereotypes, avoiding giving them the same orc hole to fight in, 6 sessions in a row is good. But it doesn't have to be something so wild and wacky that they're just like, I don't even know what to do here. That's not helpful game wise. What I was going to say earlier, just regarding reviews, um, as a as a person who has received a lot of reviews, I what's helpful to me, I just want to say it, and this is more aimed at Grootsy. What's helpful for me is just reviewers who are specific about their criticism. Uh, that I think is what's really helpful. It doesn't have to be a whole lot, but the more specific it is, like what it is that you didn't like and why. That's more than something that's the overall feel of this is great or the overall feel of this is bad or I don't think this would run well. Well, that's the specific part that you disliked or the specific part that you liked and why you liked it or why you didn't like it. I think that's the most helpful thing to get from a reviewer because that's something that can be addressed and you not so much the why of it as the specificity of it that is helpful to the person who's cobbling these adventures together.
Yeah, and we'll kind of finish with everybody can kind of show their own sites and their own creativity. But just the last riff on what JB said, I would like it to note everybody here has played some of these adventure sites, or at least plop them in. And you can have as creative an adventure as you want, but the fact of the matter is, these people everybody here who has put down a 2-page adventure site with a map, they get the privilege not just of having a review and not just being able to focus themselves, but they get to know, if you want creative satisfaction, there's things more creatively satisfying than know somebody's playing an adventure you wrote. Somebody else is having fun with all their buddies playing an adventure. There's a lot rewarding there. JB, did you want to show any of your upcoming stuff? Your website?
No, no, it's not ready, man. It's not. When it is, I'll advertise it and such. But thank you. No. No, no. I would just say if we're closing this down, I'll just say thank you for putting this on, and I had fun doing it, and really enjoyed the creative exercise and also the fun of trying to create something in a small space and a small page count. I think that's really useful. As useful as trying to make something really big and a lot less time consuming. I mean, useful from an exercise standpoint of stretching your adventure writing muscles.
Right on. Pliny, do you have anything to show? I certainly hope we see you writing adventures again.
Yes, I have another vertical site with a giant arachnid um, coming up, and I am I've made sure there's no weird anatomical looking diagrams on here. So, yeah, hopefully, ho- hopefully this one does well. We'll see.
So where can people do you have anything out there like public facing where folks can interface with you? Blog or site or drive through products?
No, nothing like that. You know, every now and again, and Prince or Milan's or Bryce's comments, but that's about it.
Perfect. So then I can shill CAG. Come to CAG server, come hang out, and you can ping Pliny with any questions you may have.
Yes, yes, do that.
Love it. Danger. Where can folks get a hold of your stuff?
Oh, I have my blogs, but most of the content is in French. But yeah, my blog it's here. It's really my blog's about old school gaming. There is a bit of everything. Some adventure I've been written, some homebrew rules, sometimes some articles about more generic what it is the OSR or this kind of stuff. But most of it's really gameable. I've been also writing several generators, one for white box and two for OSE. Never for 1E. It's too difficult. But it's something I have on my mind to have a proper character generator for 1E. I would like to have it.
I have seen that you're on the guest list for Cauldron in October. Finally,
I'm registered, so I'll be there. It's all arranged. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so you better stop this 1E is too difficult talk real quick.
No, I mean to. It's not too difficult to play 1E. I mean, it's difficult to write a character generator for 1E because
Okay.
there is a lot of options.
This is true, but that is definitely on a lot of bucket lists is to get a real solid 1E character generator. So it's a good endeavor, a good goal.
I have this one for white box and this one for OSC. The one for OSC is in French actually, but yeah.
We'll definitely post these up in the show notes, and for the Anglophone world, we will. They can all Google translate it with that technology, so it's fine.
Yeah, the white box is in English. I use it in my current open table for white box. It's really handy to have a replacement character, of course. Even though if white box is less deadly, I think it's the less deadly of the OSR games.
Very
Personal
cool.
opinion, yeah, due to the one attack per mobs. By the way, I don't know what you think about this, but I think if you play only the 3 LBB, I think it's when the characters are getting level 4, 5, it becomes really quite easy for them. I'm quite surprised because in my Mortimian campaign, so now, yeah, the average level of the groups is like 4, 5, and I think it's quite easy for the group to went through encounters. I don't know what is your experience if you compare with 1E or even BX with a lot more lethal because mainly of the attack economy. I don't have a lot of experience with ODD, so I was a bit surprised.
Yeah, my Three Little Brown Books experience is very limited. But from a 1E perspective, you definitely get a little stronger in the middle levels for sure. Becomes less lethal, more things to do, and comparable challenges are not going to be easy, but also not going to be incredibly lethal. EOTB talks about this a lot. There's a shoehorn in difficulty with 1E. So it starts out obviously lethal, um, and then moves into kind of a little bit of a lull where you got a little bit of a break, still can get killed, but plenty of tools at your disposal to mitigate those risks. And then as you move into high levels, it gets very lethal again. So that's generally the 1E. My brand, that's what I've experienced myself. Little Brown Books have not played beyond one shots for me. So I'll let others speak to that.
Yeah, like I said, it's mainly because yeah, you have the hit points, and everybody's on a D6, so of course the character the player character, they have more hit points compared to the monster because the monsters are also on D6, and also the number of attacks because most of the monster they have only one attacks and the attacks are doing 1d6 because everything is on 1d6. So of course, when you have a ghoul that do only one attack, it's not the same game than when you have a claw bite routine, and it's like this for most of the monster.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I played a year of OD&D, mainly with just the 3 Little Brown Books, and yeah, I can see how that would be the case. We never got very high because the low levels are still very dangerous when you're only have 2d6 hit points. AD&D scales very well through all the levels so that the threat level, as long as the adventure is geared correctly to the level of the characters, the danger remains moderate throughout the entire length of their career up into the high teens. Because even in the high teens, you can have them fighting, demon princes with hordes of devils at their back or dragons, things like that. But there's no real a the danger level remains moderate at the when fighting monsters that are the appropriate encounter level for the characters throughout the AD&D game. It never really tapers off. The monsters that you're fighting at the first couple levels, they get easier to fight, but the monsters you're fighting at levels 4 and 5 are going to not taper off until you get to levels 8 and 9. Yeah. But OD&D, it scales well though, because as you said, there's multiple attacks, different variations of damage. The armor class gets lower than 2. A lot of differences in the AD&D system compared to OD&D. Just to the original 3 books.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. That's why I was surprised. I'm more used to 1E. That's the game I started back in the day. So and I must say, White Box, it was quite a new experience for me.
Mm. Yeah.
But I rather like the simplicity of the game and the open-ended.
Yeah. It's really nice. It's really nice. And then, but after a while, you start saying, "Boy, what more do I want? I want to add more to my game." You're doing ongoing campaigns. You can play BX with single digit damage also, but it's not quite the same.
Yes, indeed, yeah. Variable damage is an option in BX. It's true. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Danger, for that. We'll definitely get your stuff posted up. Who's next on the list, Commodore?
So we're going kind of reverse. Giant Goose, do you want to shill your stuff?
I have absolutely nothing to shill except the Classic Adventure Gaming podcast and Discord server, which people of taste and discernment should join immediately. Let's
Checks in the
see.
mail. Checks in the mail.
Yep, thank you. Let's see. North Texas RPG Con 2025 tickets are on sale temporarily for 25% off. So go join that game with us, etc. God, no, I don't have anything to shill. I'm looking forward to next year. I look forward to writing something that's tighter and better and winning next time. So look out for that. Take care, everybody, and hope you all, viewers and hosts alike, have a fantastic rest of your days, evenings, nights, etc.
Yeah, we'll be sure to bone up on the psionics rules before you get that in.
Oh, you. All right. Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much.
And Grutzi, thanks again for the incredible help you've done as a judge. I probably should shout out now because Owen had to leave because he had the excellent excuse of actually running a game. I also had EOTB, who is a CAG regular, as another judge, and Shocktop, who you will hear in the episode of NAP. He was also another of the contest judges. I really appreciate all the judges. It's been awesome to have all the variety of feedback there. But Grutzi, you want to shill what you have?
I don't have that much. I have my little blog, which is basically dead in the water with the reviews. And I have one adventure on drive through, which is a bit different than most of the stuff. Was written 2019 in a different time. Was in a different place then. But I'll put the link up there. You can put it on. Other stuff. I mean, I help the Merciless Merchants from time to time with their adventures, mainly in brainstorming and kind of consulting on stuff they do. So Malrex, John Bar, and the likes. Buy their stuff. It's really really great. And the next thing coming up from me will probably something you are partly responsible for, Commodore, because you kind of started the next contest already on your blog. When you made this review of the Isle of the Dead or what it was, and then shot out that people should do better than what you have reviewed. So I'll try to get my Isle of the Dead dungeon out in the next few weeks.
I genuinely really look forward to that. It was a pleasure to read your stuff. And Scott, you want to talk about your blog?
Yeah, I've got a blog called The Gloomy Forest. I plug link here. I basically have about 40 years worth of content ideas, and I've been slowly converting some of that and putting it up online just for the heck of it. But my activity on the blog is fairly sporadic. Sometimes I'll have big spurts of activity, and then weeks will pass where nothing happens. One of the pieces that I cut out of Etta Cap's cottage was that she has a mysterious suitor elsewhere, and there are clues to an adventure location called Bug Spittle's Hive, which I am also working on for. I don't know whether I'm going to ultimately sell it or just post it on my blog, but it's a fairly comprehensive dungeon. And then, like Grutzi, I am also taking up Commodore's challenge to create something based on the Isle of the Dead painting. Got my first maps done, and now I'm just trying to flesh out the idea. I like what I have so far. And I also am looking forward to the Adventure Site contest part 2.
And I should note actually that everybody who has contributed, all that you're giving, I don't, I do publish it under my label, but everybody has their own publishing rights. There's not any kind of exclusivity. there have been some entries, like Stripe had a wonderful entry that really needed to be an 8-page adventure, and he's going to be turning that into it. He's going to be working on a nice dragon-based adventure coming out of that. But everybody, even the winners who have published, by all means, expand, play out, sell them. It's great. Everything here, I'm just publishing a free community resource on this. I'm not ever I don't make a cent out of it. I just want to give reviews to everybody and have a community resource. But anybody who has any of this experience, everybody owns it and everybody can publish whatever they want.
Awesome. It was a great contest. I really enjoyed being a part of it.
Yes, Commodore. Excellent job getting this thing going, drumming up these gentlemen and all the other contestants to get this resource out there so that we can all drop quality adventure sites into our campaigns and games. So, very much appreciated. A lot of effort. Being an organizer of these things often goes unpraised, but let me heap a little praise on you as well for getting this together, putting it together, putting out the final product for the community. It's very useful.
Thanks. I can shill mine. I basically hosted the start of it at my little blog, which is Coldlight Press RPG. Um, it's a little website. You'll see that in the show notes. I do a fair number of reviews. I actually have a little thing I've been doing for almost a year now, which is called Crapshoot Monday, where I just take some free thing I find on itch.io and review it, trying to just get a lot out. And there's a lot of crap you go through, but it's also been very educational. And I've also found the occasional gem in it, but I'll converse with other things too. I've got to say, for everybody who's participated, both everybody here and everybody who's listening, everybody who contributed, it's been a privilege. It was a privilege to read everybody's entries. It really is an honor to have these people turn in their stuff, all their creative work. It really is just a wonderful thing. I Everybody was very bold. Everybody was very creative. Pliny and Goose especially. I want to praise you guys for the very first adventure. I know it's something to submit, sight unseen, no experience at all. It's just been really I hold that as an honor. I am going to be kind to everybody who puts something in there, not trying to make money, not trying to make the massive hundreds and hundreds of dollars that you can. But I just appreciate everybody wanting to do something with enthusiasm for the community, and that's been great. It's really been a wonderful praise. As a little aside, as Gritzy and Scott said, one of my reviews most recently was somebody who took and kind of misused the wonderful, very classic Andrew Buckland painting, The Isle of Dead. If you want to take a look at it, it's a gorgeous painting. It's 5 different versions of it. And when you look at it, you just see it's an 1800s painting, but if you look at it, you just see an adventure site or a dungeon when you look at it. And I said, if anybody wants to send in to me a dungeon based on that painting, I'd be happy to review it. And if anybody wants to publish after that, I'd be happy to help with editing and publish under their name or mine. You can find my own stuff. I do write a lot of adventures. You can find my own stuff here and there. Coldlight Press on Drive-Thru RPG is my own title, and it's what the Adventure Sites is published under as well. Most of what I do is pay what you want. I'm not here really to make money. I'm here to share my own enthusiasm with the rest of the community, because I love making these things. I love seeing people play. That's always been my favorite part of this creative side of the hobby. And I guess the final thing is, I hope everybody who listens, go download. It's absolutely free. You cannot pay me. You cannot give me money for this compilation. It is completely free. Go get Adventure Sites 1 and plop it on the table. I guarantee you and your friends will have fun that night of gaming whenever you do it, as a one-shot, as part of a continuation. I don't care what system you use. Just read the adventures, and thinking about them it's all good, but the heart of the hobby comes when you plop something on the table and play. Make it your own. Everybody here, I think you've heard, everybody here just loves playing the game. Everybody here wants to have more gaming played. That's kind of the whole point of the classic adventure gaming podcast is just people should be playing. And everything that emerges comes from people just sitting down and playing adventures. So please, by all means, I mean, I'm going to be running this again starting in November, but I don't care. You can start right now. You can start tomorrow by looking at this and then starting to write your own adventure sites for your players. There's something very rewarding about that.
Absolutely. I'll even go so far as to say, if you want to pay Commodore, download these adventures and play them. Don't read them. That's the best way you could probably pay Commodore right there. So play some games.
Absolutely. It makes me excited anytime I hear anybody enjoying these adventure sites. I mean, as you can hear, I've enjoyed them myself.
Awesome. Any final words from anybody before we sign off?
Kudos to everyone. The great publication, and I love all the adventures. They're all very good.
They're all great. Yeah. D&D is fun. What can you say?
Yeah, it was an honor to have read and judged them all. And Commodore, if you do this again, I'm in again as a judge and as a participant.
I definitely will be. You're going to be seeing me doing this as an annual contest. I love doing this kind of thing.
Next time, no spiders.
No
That's
promises.
the one restriction. No arachnids.
Hey, you and I both put in scorpions.
I know. I gotta step up my game too.
6 legs or less root.
Yeah. Yep. All ants.
Has to all small creatures, no medium or large. It's the new and can't be poisonous. It's good times. Well, gentlemen, thank you all for coming on the show, for sharing your thoughts, for sharing your expertise, for sharing your creativity with these adventures. Very much appreciated. And everyone listening, thank you again. Come over to the server. Love to have you. Love to play games with you. Love to talk. So thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you, Gus.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. That was a doozy of an episode. Thank you so much if you've tuned in this far. We truly appreciate it. Not much to add other than if you're interested in picking up the Adventure Site Contest 1 compilation from Ben, I'll link to his Drive-Thru RPG page. If you're interested in competing, and you should, in Ben's Adventure Site Contest 2, he'll be launching that October 1st. I'll link to his blog, as well as you can obviously come on over to the Discord, which we highly encourage, and chat with him. He goes by the handle of Commodore. So with that, again, thank you for listening. We truly appreciate you. Come on over to the Discord, chat with us, game with us, and we'll talk to you all soon.